Ukraine's war with Russia has entered its fifth year, but away from the front lines in the east, there is another battle emerging in Kiev. President Volodymyr Zelensky is facing a corruption crisis within the country's security apparatus. Ukrainian Air Force's logistics commander and head of the SBU's regional office are in the middle of a corruption scandal. The commander is charged with embezzlement of funds allocated for the construction of aircraft shelter.
I received reports from the Security Service of Ukraine. I tasked Yevgeny Khmara and Alexander Pokhlid with working to cleanse the service of those whose interests are not aligned with Ukraine at all. Results have already been achieved. Today, corresponding detentions took place, and it is very important that fair verdicts follow. Everyone in public office must work for Ukraine and for the sake of Ukraine. There will be no other option. Glory to Ukraine.
Ukraine's Prosecutor General Ruslan Kravchenko said the suspect was caught red-handed while trying to transfer illegal money. Without revealing the name of the suspect, he had said $320,000 was seized from the arrested individual. Earlier this month, remember, a former energy minister, German Galushenko, was detained while attempting to leave the country, while being in the middle of a $100 million corruption scandal. This comes in the backdrop of a separate tussle between the country's security agency, the SBU, and the anti-graft watchdog, NABU or NABU. Last year, Volodymyr Zelensky brought a legislation to curtail powers of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. He said the move was important to keep the agencies immune from Russian influence. But widespread outrage forced him to reinstate the agency's independence. And since then, the SBU and NABU have carried out a cross-agency arrest. In the latest, in fact, the Anti-Corruption Agency has arrested the employee of SBU's Kiev branch and charged him with taking $68,000 bribe from two people. The series of corruption scandals, remember, comes at a time when Ukraine is facing a costly war with Russia. As things stand, the country requires $588 billion for reconstruction. It is also seeking weapons packages from its Western partners to hold the line against Russia. And for more on this, let me go across to James Jackson. He is a journalist and political analyst joining us live from Berlin at the moment. James, good evening. Welcome to WION. What do you make of this? There's this country which is embroiled in a war against Russia, and you have scandal after scandal emerging within Volodymyr Zelensky's inner circle.
Yes, well, I mean, whether it's within his inner circle is debatable. There's absolutely issues with corruption, particularly around procurement in Ukraine during this war, which, as you mentioned, is now entering its fifth year. Of course, there has been previous cases where members of his close circle were implicated. But I would say in this case, it's a much more typical arrest, which was made of the logistics chief of the Air Force Command. I mean, in an extraordinary situation like a war, a full-scale war, defensive war that Ukraine is fighting, I think, unfortunately, this is the perfect ground for corruption to grow on. I don't think this says too much about Ukraine, and the fact that the SBU's internal security unit is going ahead to arrest such senior people does show that there is some, real action being made in a fight against corruption. But, the fact that this has to be done is a clear sign of weakness, and it does also remove some legitimacy for Ukraine and leave allies questioning, why are we giving them money if it's going to the pockets of regional bureaucrats and military logistics officials?
James, while allies question the entire situation and the money being given to Ukraine, there are internal protests that Volodymyr Zelensky has also faced. The time that he passed a law to, quote unquote, get the anti-graft agency immune from Russian influence and so curb their powers, there were demonstrations, there were protests that were taken out on the streets of Ukraine.
Absolutely. The idea that Zelensky is infallible is something which is, no longer popular internationally or in Ukraine. At one point, I think many analysts see him as an incredibly brave leader who, unlike many, did stick in his country and who, works quite tirelessly. But that doesn't mean that his administration hasn't made some pretty serious mistakes. For example, last November, when the Energy and Justice Ministry resigned,
yes.
And there were protests in Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine isn't a country that sees that many protests compared to Western Europe generally. And the fact that they would do it within wartime really does show the strength of feeling there. Of course, he's in an unenviable position, Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky, because his population are tiring of war and increasingly wanting a deal where effectively land, which has been very hard fought for, would be given to Russia, which, you could see as almost a reward for their war of aggression. But he doesn't have that many options. And it's not even clear that Russia will take this deal, because it does look at least possible that they're only interested in regime change in Ukraine, and to have Ukraine as a kind of client state similar to neighboring Belarus.
Okay, so we'll have to wait and see how this moves forward for not just Ukraine's political class and their, military class, but for Volodymyr Zelensky himself, who has been facing these protests internally. Thank you very much, James. I'll leave it here for your perspective.
Thanks for having me.
Making us understand what the situation is.